My secret daughter applied for a scholarship at her billionaire CEO father's foundation using his last name without my knowledge. I became very furious because I kept her a secret. The envelope was pristine white, expensive stock, embossed with gold lettering. Sterling Ridge Academy. I found it buried beneath Natalie's geometry textbook on a Thursday afternoon, and the moment I saw the name on the application, Natalie Hayes Morrison, my coffee cup slipped from my fingers and shattered across the hardwood floor. Not Hayes. Morrison. The name I'd spent 13 years erasing from our lives. Natalie. My voice cracked through our brownstone apartment, sharp enough to shatter glass. Living room. Now. She appeared in the doorway seconds later, 16 years old and heartbreakingly beautiful. Her father's crystalline blue eyes stared back at me from beneath my dark copper hair. Those eyes. God, those eyes had haunted every sleepless night since the day I walked away from James Morrison. You went through my things. Not a question. A statement delivered with the kind of calm that made my hands shake. You applied to his school. I held up the letter like evidence at a trial, using his name. It's my name too, Mom. Legally. She crossed her arms, chin lifted in defiance. Or did you forget that part when you've been calling me Hayes for 13 years? The paper trembled between my fingers. Sterling Ridge Academy wasn't just any prestigious private school in Boston. It was founded by the Morrison family dynasty. My ex-husband James Morrison wasn't just on the board. He was the board, chairman, benefactor, the man whose name opened doors I'd spent over a decade keeping firmly locked. How long? My throat felt tight. How long have you known about him? Since I was 12. Her voice didn't waver, didn't apologize. I found the wedding album you hid in the basement, the divorce papers, everything. For years. She'd carried this secret for 4 years, researching, planning, watching me lie to her face every time she asked about her father. Natalie, you don't understand what you've done. My interview is tomorrow. She cut me off, those Morrison eyes blazing with determination I recognized too well. 3 o'clock. He's going to be there. The room spun. What? He requested to meet me personally. Her voice softened just slightly, revealing the scared girl beneath the brave facade. The girl with the remarkable application essay who happens to have his last name. He knows, Mom, or he's about to figure it out. My knees buckled. I gripped the doorframe, fighting to stay upright as 13 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled around me. James Morrison, the billionaire I'd loved and lost. The man I'd kept hidden from his own daughter to protect her from his family's suffocating expectations and his mother's controlling hands. And now Natalie had opened that door herself. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you do this? Because I deserve to know where I came from. Tears pooled in her eyes now, crystalline blue, catching the afternoon light. I deserve to know my father, and you don't get to make that choice for me anymore. She was right. God help me, my 16-year-old daughter was absolutely right. But she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. No idea that James Morrison came with an empire of expectations, a mother who tried to reduce me to a breeding machine, and a world that would try to control every aspect of her life. I'd kept her safe for 13 years. Now, because of one scholarship application and a desperate need for truth, that safety was about to explode. If you've ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and letting them make their own mistakes, hit that like button right now. Because trust me, this story is about to get a whole lot more interesting. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens when Natalie meets her father for the first time. Let me take you back 13 years. Back to when I was 24 years old and stupid enough to believe in fairy tales. I was barely surviving as a junior architect at a mid-tier firm in Boston. 60-hour work weeks for a salary that barely covered my share of rent in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. My bosses took credit for my designs while I lived on ramen noodles and ambition, dreaming of projects that would never see daylight because I had no connections, no family money, no path forward except grinding poverty and borrowed hope. Then came the gallery opening that changed everything. Architects of Tomorrow was showcasing emerging designers with visionary projects. My sustainable housing design, converting abandoned industrial sites into affordable eco-friendly communities, had somehow been accepted. They'd built a scale model, displayed it in a Manhattan gallery alongside architects twice my age with 10 times my resources. My best friend Amanda had forced me into a thrift store black dress and uncomfortable heels I couldn't afford. You need to network, she'd insisted. Brilliant doesn't pay bills without connections. So there I stood, surrounded by people drinking wine that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, trying desperately to look like I belonged. That's when I heard his voice behind me. Is this your design? I turned around and forgot how to breathe. The man standing before my model was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it too many times. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. Crystalline blue, intelligent, intense, seeing right through my thrift store armor to the terrified girl underneath. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, but he wore it casually. Like wealth was so intrinsic to his being that he didn't need to flaunt it. Yes, I managed. It's mine. It's extraordinary. He moved closer, studying the model with genuine fascination. You've solved problems here that major firms with unlimited budgets still struggle with. This water reclamation system alone is genius. Heat flooded my cheeks. Most people called my designs too idealistic, not financially viable. Most people are idiots who care more about profit margins than human impact. He looked up, hitting me with the full force of those eyes. I'm James Morrison. He said it like I should recognize the name. I didn't. Margot Hayes. Tell me about this project, Margot. What inspired it? And just like that, we were talking. Not networking small talk or polite social chatter. Real conversation about architecture and innovation, about using creativity to solve actual human problems instead of building monuments to wealth. 3 hours evaporated like minutes. The gallery could have been empty for all I noticed. There was just him and me, and ideas flowing between us like electricity, like recognition, like coming home to someone I'd never met. Work for me, he said suddenly as the gallery began closing. I laughed. I'm sorry, what? The Morrison Foundation needs someone to head our urban development initiatives. Someone who thinks the way you do, big picture, human-centered, actually willing to prioritize impact over image. You don't even know me. I've spent 3 hours watching the way you think, the way you problem solve, the passion you have for your work. He pulled out a business card, his fingers brushing mine as I took it. The touch was electric, sent sparks racing up my arm. Have dinner with me tomorrow. If you still think I'm crazy afterward, forget I asked. I stared at the card. Heavy stock, expensive printing. James Morrison, CEO, Morrison Technologies. You're serious. I'm always serious about things that matter. His smile could have melted steel. And I think you matter, Margot Hayes. I should have said no. Should have recognized the danger in those blue eyes, in the way my heart was racing, in the reckless hope blooming in my chest like a dangerous flower. Instead, I said yes. That dinner turned into another dinner, which turned into a job offer I couldn't refuse, which turned into late nights at the foundation designing projects that could actually change lives, which turned into falling in love so fast and so completely that I didn't see the warning signs until it was too late. 6 months after that gallery opening, James proposed. We were standing in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The city lights spread below us like fallen stars. The ring he slipped onto my finger was simple, elegant, a single diamond that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire career. Marry me, he'd whispered. Not because it's practical or makes sense. Because I can't imagine building a life without you in it. I said yes before he finished speaking. We married at his family's estate in Newport. Small ceremony, close friends, and his mother Victoria Morrison presiding over everything like a disapproving queen. I should have paid more attention to Victoria that day. Should have noticed how her smile never reached her ice-chip blue eyes, how she looked at me like I was a temporary problem she'd eventually erase. She's charming, Victoria had said to James, her tone dripping with disdain. Though I do hope you've considered the optics, darling. The foundation's board had certain expectations about who you would marry. I ignored the warning bells, focused instead on the life James and I were building together, transforming communities through sustainable design, working side by side late into the night, making real differences in real lives. For 18 months, it was perfect. We were perfect. Then came the board meeting that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday morning, 13 months into our marriage. I'd been pulled from a construction site visit without explanation, seated beside James while Victoria orchestrated what I would later realize was a carefully planned ambush. "We need to discuss succession planning," Victoria announced from the head of the conference table. Around her sat the Morrison family dynasty, generations of old money and older expectations, their collective wealth capable of funding small nations. I felt James tense beside me. Succession. His jaw tightened in that way I'd learned meant he was controlling his temper. "I'm 31, Mother. I'm not planning on dying anytime soon." "Of course not, darling. But the foundation needs stability, continuity. We need to ensure the Morrison legacy continues into the next generation." Her cold eyes fixed on me like a specimen under glass. Which brings us to a delicate matter. The conference room contracted around me. I knew what was coming. Somehow I knew. "You've been married over a year now," Victoria continued with clinical precision. "Traditionally, this would be when we'd expect announcements about grandchildren, about heirs to continue the family mission. Our timeline for having children is our business," I said quietly, my hands clenched beneath the table so hard my nails drew blood. "Normally, yes. But when those children would inherit control of a foundation worth $500 million, it becomes the board's business as well." Victoria slid a folder across the polished mahogany toward James. "We've taken the liberty of consulting with the finest fertility specialists in the country. They're prepared to work with you both on an accelerated timeline." The words hit me like physical blows. Accelerated timeline. Work with you both. Like I was livestock being prepared for breeding. "This meeting is over." James stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "Sit down, James." Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. "You're the CEO, but I'm still chairman of this board, and we have legitimate concerns." "Concerns about what?" I heard myself ask, even though part of me was screaming to stay silent. Victoria's smile was surgical. "You come from nothing, dear. No family wealth, no social connections, no legacy. Your value to this family lies entirely in your ability to produce the next generation of Morrisons. So the question becomes, can you? Or have we made a very expensive mistake?" The room spun. I watched James defend me, heard him demanding apologies, threatening to resign. But beneath his outrage, I saw something else flicker in those blue eyes I loved so much. Doubt. It was barely there, just a momentary shadow. But I caught it. And in that instant, something fundamental broke between us. Because if James could doubt me even for a second, if he could hear his mother reduce me to my reproductive capacity and feel even a flicker of agreement, then maybe I had been wrong about everything. Maybe he had never really seen me as an equal after all. Maybe I had always been just a means to an end. The realization didn't come as a dramatic revelation. It came as a slow, creeping horror that spread through my chest like ice water. I sat through the rest of that meeting in silence, watching the man I loved fail to fully defend my humanity. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that our marriage was already over. I just didn't know I was pregnant yet. Have you ever felt reduced to what you could provide instead of who you are? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. And if you're invested in finding out what Margot does next, smash that subscribe button, because the next 13 years are going to change everything. The next 6 months became a slow-motion catastrophe. Victoria's concerns became board discussions. Board discussions became pressure. Pressure became scheduled doctor's appointments and fertility treatments that transformed our intimate life into a clinical procedure aimed at producing the Morrison heir. Every month became a cycle of hope and humiliation. Every negative pregnancy test felt like failure branded across my chest. Every appointment felt like an audition I was failing. Victoria watched me like a scientist studying a flawed experiment, waiting for results or discard. "I love you," James would say after another negative test, his voice gentle but his eyes distant. This doesn't change anything between us. But it changed everything. Love, I discovered, could coexist with resentment. His gentleness felt like pity. His reassurances felt like obligation. And beneath it all was the terrible knowledge that to his family, and perhaps to some buried part of him, I was valuable only for what I could produce, not for who I was. We fought. Quietly, at first, then louder. "You've let your mother turn our marriage into a breeding program," I said one night, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "I'm trying to balance everything," he replied, running his hands through his hair. "The foundation, my family, you." "Stop saying that." The words exploded from me. "Stop acting like everyone's needs matter equally. Your mother's expectations do not matter more than my dignity." His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Maybe the problem is that you're too sensitive, seeing attacks where there's just practical planning." The words hung between us like a blade. He had just dismissed my pain as oversensitivity, reduced my legitimate concerns to emotional overreaction, gaslit me into believing the problem was my perception, not his family's cruelty. "Get out," I whispered. "Margot, get out of this room. Get out of my sight. And don't you dare tell me I'm overreacting." I left 3 days later, Tuesday morning, 2 a.m., while James slept in the bed we'd once shared with love instead of obligation. I packed one bag, left my key on the kitchen counter beside a note that said simply, "I deserve better than this." Amanda picked me up without questions. Just gave me her spare room, wine, and space to fall apart. 3 weeks later, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in her bathroom, I made the hardest decision of my life. I didn't tell him, because if I showed up pregnant, one of 2 things would happen. He'd accuse me of lying, of trapping him, of using a baby to access Morrison money. Or he'd welcome me back, not because he loved me, but because I'd finally produced what his family demanded. Either way, I lost. Either way, my daughter, because somehow I knew she'd be a daughter, would be trapped in the same gilded cage that had nearly destroyed me. So I chose silence. Chose to raise Natalie alone in our small brownstone apartment. Chose to give her a life free from Morrison expectations and Victoria's controlling hands. 13 years of birthday parties for 2. School plays where I was the only parent cheering. Late nights helping with homework while building my own architecture firm from nothing. 13 years of Natalie asking, "Where's my dad?" and me answering, "It's complicated." Until the day she stopped asking. Until the day she found the wedding album hidden in the basement storage, along with divorce papers and a birth certificate that read, "Natalie Hayes Morrison." For years she carried that knowledge in silence, researching the father I'd kept hidden. For years of planning, waiting, perfecting her scholarship essay about climate-adaptive sustainable housing. And then she applied to his foundation using both our names. The secret was out, and there was no going back. What would you do in Margot's position? Would you have told him about the pregnancy or kept the secret to protect your child? I want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. And hit that like button if you're Team Margot, or if you think she made the wrong choice. Either way, subscribe because this confrontation is going to be intense. The next afternoon, I stood outside James Morrison's office for the first time in 13 years, my hand gripping Natalie's, so tight I was probably hurting her. But she didn't pull away. She was scared too. I could feel it in the slight tremor of her fingers. "Ready?" I whispered. "No," she whispered back. "But let's do it anyway." The Sterling Ridge Academy offices occupied the top floor of Morrison Tower in downtown Boston. Everything was exactly as I remembered: sleek glass and polished steel, modern art that cost more than most people's houses, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. A polished assistant led us through corridors that felt both familiar and foreign, past conference rooms where I'd once presented world-changing projects, past offices where I'd once belonged. Everything the same, everything different. Then we were standing outside James's door. "Miss Hayes and Miss Morrison," the assistant announced, opening the door. The names hung in the air like an accusation. We stepped inside. James stood behind his desk, and time collapsed. 13 years had passed since I'd last seen him, but those blue eyes were exactly the same. His dark hair was threaded with silver now. Lines marked his face that hadn't been there before. He looked distinguished, powerful, and utterly frozen as he stared at Natalie. I watched him see himself in her face. The crystalline blue eyes, the sharp cheekbones, the stubborn Morrison chin, the way she held herself with quiet confidence that was pure him. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We just stood there, three people connected by DNA and secrets and 13 years of carefully maintained silence. Natalie found her voice first. "Mr. Morrison," she said, steadier than I expected. "I'm Natalie Hayes Morrison. Thank you for agreeing to meet me." James's eyes moved from Natalie to me, and I watched 13 years of questions flash across his face in seconds. Confusion, realization, shock, hurt, anger, wonder. Margot. My name on his lips was a ghost of memory, weighted with everything we'd been and lost. What is this? This was the moment I'd been dreading for 13 years. The moment the truth detonated. I took a deep breath, held my daughter's hand tighter, and said the words that would change all our lives forever. "This is your daughter, James. The one I never told you about." The silence that followed could have shattered diamonds. James gripped the edge of his desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His face had gone pale, color draining away as he processed what I'd just confirmed. "My daughter," he repeated slowly, testing the words. His voice was carefully controlled. Too controlled. "You have a daughter. We have a daughter." "Yes." His eyes locked on Natalie. "How old are you?" 16. "I'll be 17 in August." I watched him do the math. Watched the realization crash over him like a wave. She was conceived during our marriage, or just after. Watched his face cycle through more emotions than I could name. 16 years. His voice cracked on the last word. "You've had my daughter for 16 years, and you never told me." "James, maybe we should let Natalie wait outside while we—" "No." Natalie's voice was firm, surprisingly strong for a 16-year-old facing her father for the first time. "I want to stay. This is about me too." James looked at Natalie, really looked at her. I watched him see not just himself, but pieces of his own mother in her features. The high cheekbones, the determined set of her jaw. "You look like my mother," he said quietly. "Same bone structure, same expression when you're being stubborn." "I get stubborn from both sides," Natalie said with a small smile. "Mom says I'm doubly cursed." A ghost of a smile crossed James's face before it disappeared. He looked back at me, and the hurt in his eyes was devastating. "Natalie, would you mind giving your mother and me a few minutes alone? My assistant can get you anything you'd like, coffee, tea, something to eat." Natalie looked at me. I nodded, even though my heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. "It's okay, baby. I'll be right here." After Natalie left, James moved around his desk. He didn't sit, just stood there staring at me like I was a stranger, like he'd never known me at all. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe I'd never known him either. 16 years, Margot. His voice rose, the careful control cracking. "She's 16 years old. Which means you were pregnant when you left me, or got pregnant right after. And you never thought to tell me. I had a daughter growing up without me, and you never once thought I deserved to know." The anger in his voice was justified. I knew that, but it didn't make facing it any easier. "I thought about it every single day," I said, my own anger rising to meet his. "Every single day, James." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I was terrified." The words exploded for me. 13 years of fear and justification pouring out. Terrified that if I told you I was pregnant, you'd either reject me as a liar trying to trap you, or you'd welcome me back only because I'd finally done what your family wanted. Either way, I lost. Either way, Natalie would be valued only as the Morrison heir instead of as a person. "You think I would have only wanted her as an heir?" His voice was raw with disbelief. "Your mother made it very clear that was my only value to your family. Why would our daughter be any different?" James closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Something had shifted in his expression. Something like understanding breaking through the anger. "My mother," he said quietly. "You thought Victoria would try to control her life. I knew she would try to control her life. Just like she tried to control mine. Just like she tried to turn our marriage into a breeding program for the Morrison legacy." We stood in silence, 13 years of hurt and mistakes hanging between us like smoke. "What is she like?" James finally asked, his voice softer now, more vulnerable. The question deflated my anger, because beneath all the accusations and pain, that was what mattered. Not what we'd done to each other, but who Natalie was. "She's brilliant," I said. "Top of her class. Already winning design competitions. She wants to create sustainable housing for climate refugees." A real smile crossed James's face. "Your passion and my problem solving. She's the best parts of both of us, James. Smart and creative and kind. She has your intensity and my empathy. Your confidence and my conscience." My voice caught. "She's everything we might have built together if we hadn't fallen apart. And I've missed every moment of her life." "Yes. Because you didn't trust me enough to tell me she existed. Because I trusted my instincts that said bringing her into your world would mean sacrificing her autonomy to your family's expectations." James moved to the window, stared out at the Boston skyline. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I want to know her, Margot. I want to be part of her life if she'll let me. Not to control her or mold her into some Morrison legacy. Just to know my daughter. That's her decision. Not mine, not yours. Hers. And if she says yes, then we figure it out. Carefully. On Natalie's terms. With boundaries that protect her." James turned back to face me, tears in his eyes. "My mother's going to lose her mind when she finds out. Your mother doesn't get a vote." His laugh was short and bitter. "You're right about that. I failed you by letting her interfere in our marriage. I won't make that mistake with Natalie." "James." "I mean it, Margot. I've spent 13 years thinking about what went wrong between us. About the mistakes I made. I let my mother's expectations matter more than your dignity. I let the board's concerns matter more than our marriage. I was weak when you needed me to be strong." He paused, his voice breaking. "I won't be weak again. Natalie comes first. Not the foundation, not my mother, not the legacy. Just her." Something in my chest cracked open. Hope, dangerous and fragile. "She's waiting," I said softly. "We should bring her back in." James nodded and opened the door. Our daughter stood just outside, trying to look casual, but clearly having heard at least some of our conversation through the heavy door. "Come in, Natalie," James said gently. She walked back in, her eyes moving between us, trying to read the temperature of the room. "So," she said, her voice only slightly shaky, "are you two going to figure this out? Or do I need to parent both of you?" James laughed, a real laugh this time. "You definitely got your mother's directness. And your inability to back down from a challenge," I added. Natalie looked at James. "I don't expect you to be my dad overnight. I don't even know what that looks like. But I'd like the chance to find out. If you want that too." "I do," James said immediately. "More than anything. But I need you to understand something," Natalie continued, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not the Morrison heir. I'm not a legacy project or a succession plan. I'm just Natalie, a 16-year-old girl who likes architecture and terrible pop music and stays up too late reading. That's all I want to be." James crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "That's all I want you to be too. Just Natalie. My daughter. If you'll let me earn that title." Natalie's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've wanted to meet you my whole life. I didn't know you existed," James said, his own voice breaking. "But I've wanted you my whole life too. I just didn't know it until right now." He opened his arms, a question. Natalie hesitated for only a moment before stepping into them, letting her father hold her for the first time. I stood there watching them, these two people I loved more than life itself, finally together, and felt the weight of 13 years lift from my shoulders. We had a long road ahead, boundaries to establish, Victoria to deal with. A lifetime of missed moments that could never be recovered. But as I watched James hold our daughter, as I saw Natalie finally meet the father she dreamed about, I knew we'd made the right choice coming here. Sometimes the truth destroys everything. And sometimes, against all odds, it builds something even stronger from the wreckage. If you found this story interesting, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have kept the secret or told the truth from the beginning? There's no right answer, and I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. And if you made it all the way to the end, comment Team Truth or Team Protection, so I know you're part of the family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.